Hello, good morning, and welcome to today's oral webinar. Thank you for joining us. We have 7 intoxicating presentations lined up for you for the sessions both today and tomorrow. I am Tom Kerr, Treasurer of Aura, and I will be the host this morning. The title of today's event is The Process of Innovation. The session will introduce 3 new approaches to the innovation process from expert practitioners in the field. The presentation titles are Building a Better Innovation Pipeline Using Creative Minds, A New Global Approach to Innovation to Help Brands Find Their Edge, and Human-Centric Innovation for Less Time and Less Money. That seems to tick all the bells, all the buttons, all the boxes. Goodness me, put my mind in gear. Many of you will be familiar with the structure of these events, but for the benefit of anyone who's new to us, I should cover off some key points before I introduce the first speakers. We will deal with questions at the end of each presentation, so do please put your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom center of your Zoom screen during each presentation. You can also post entries in the chat box to communicate with the total group or with a named individual, but please resist the temptation to put questions in that chat box as we just might not pick up in them. Use the Q&A box. Also, I'll bring to your attention that we will ask you to give a rating for each presentation towards the end of the event. At around 10:25, we will launch a poll to provide you with an opportunity to rate each presentation and the event as a whole. So please do it. It only takes a minute and it helps inform future events. To apply a bit of behavioural economics as a gentle nudge, we know from experience that over 70% of your colleagues complete the poll. Do you really want to be in the 30%? Of course you don't. Okay, moving on. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce our first speakers. Mathilde Levy, Senior Consumer and Market Insight Manager, Europe and US at Reckitt Benckiser, and Tom DeRoy, Managing Partner and Head of Insight Activation at Insites Consulting. The presentation is titled Building a Better Innovation Pipeline Using Creative Minds. The innovation process starts with idea generation. Many of you may have used the what-if approach to idea generation in the past, I guess, but what do you do when traditional approaches don't lead to any surprising or even new ideas? Things have moved on, and the team at Insites Consulting have developed a new approach to generate disruptive, out-of-the-box ideas. So now we're going to hear all about this new approach. Tom, Mathilde, can I hand over to you?
Sure, thanks. Tom, if you want to do the introduction and then I carry on the project itself.
Yes, of course. We are presenting to you today a project we did a little while ago on Solid Bang, and we will demonstrate actually to you how creative crowdsourcing can help you to come up with the best ideas that will lead to successful concepts. So Mathilde, can you please share us a little bit what your challenge was?
Yeah, sure. So before starting with that, so I'm working at Reckitt Benckiser, as Tom mentioned. So for those who don't know this group, it's a global FMCG player, and we have lots of different types of brands, I would say. Some are global brands like Finish, Airwick, Dettol, Lysol, etc. So a lot of global brands with a global presence. Then we have more regional brands like Solid Bang, where these brands have are present in specific geographies like Europe, for example, for Solid Bang. And then we have purely local. So for example, in France, we have Desktop, which is drain cleaner, etc. So really different types of brands, etc. So today I'm going to talk about Solid Bang. And Solid Bang, you have it in the UK, so you know it a bit. So it's a surface cleaner, which has really kind of unique positioning. Internally, we call it the power cleaner category. So usually you use this type of product for really difficult stains to remove. That's the famous berry spot that you have in the UK, who is demonstrating it. It's really in front of your eyes, action, etc. The challenge we got with Solid Bang is that we face declining brand penetration, so which was a sign of a lack of consumer relevance. And also we had quite an empty innovation pipeline. So really, what we wanted to have is to get new and fresh insights into this category that would fit well Slate Bank. So with this very unique positioning to also inform our innovation strategy. So we went to Insites Consulting, and first we did a consumer consulting square. So that is an ongoing online community to really generate these insights. During this research, which ran for several weeks, we combined qualitative observational techniques, in-home, in-store deprivation, activation activities, all that kind of stuff. And also, as it was throughout the time, we could also recycle the learning and look back to the consumer and deep dive into the community-specific topics. At the end of it, of course, in this type of research, you have a lot to digest because it's like more than 3 weeks of collaboration with consumers, lots and lots of learnings, and it's a lot to digest. The other challenge we had with CILIT is that as being part of a European hub for innovation in my role, I'm having contact with people all over Europe. So it's very hard to bring everyone in the same place, etc., to share the learning. The report is very long. Not all people will see the presentation and will read the report. So there's a kind of a challenge of disseminating the learning, I would say, and so to collaborate as a global team, because of course the insights is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of the journey to really starting our innovation process. So starting with ideation. So what we decided to do is to use the studio, which has been developed by Insites Consulting, and is was used for us as an internal tool for global collaboration. We used this tool through their systems of walls and tiles to spread insights. So the walls were basically the big themes we wanted to deep dive. For example, I would say effortless cleaning. This is an example. And then the tiles are really the insights that came within the theme. What we got is that we got 3 walls, we got 16 tiles, we got 47 registered users, which was quite good, I would say, for a brand like Slate Bank. And what was good is that it was not only market insight researchers, but also people from R&D, from marketing, from procurement, all that kind of people. People were spending more than 30 minutes per week to discover the findings. And we did also like some quizzes, etc., to create internal engagement, I would say. Also, we used this studio to do an internal ideation workshop. And this is even more relevant during lockdown, because now the workshop, we need to do it digitally. But even before, when you have people all over Europe, it's very hard to make them travel at one place and sit in a room for 2 or 3 days. So we did that at that time digitally. And what we observed is that we got 18 participants and 19 ideas, which was quite disappointing, I would say, because frankly, the ideas weren't disruptive enough. There are lots of different reasons for that. You can have like internal blockers or symptoms of saying, okay, we've tried that in the past, we haven't succeeded, etc. So for brainstorming, you know, you really need to open your mind. And here, having internal brainstorming only with people internally was not enough. So we didn't get enough ideas. We were wondering if we had the right people, if they were consumer relevant, I would say. So it was quite disappointing. So, and here I'm going to pass it on to Tom for what we did.
Yeah, and that's the moment Matilde and I had a chat. What can we do? How can we boost the number of ideas and the quality of ideas? And that's when we decided together to bring in the help of what we can call creative crowdsourcing. So we are going to do crowdsourcing among consumers, but among the most creative consumers out there. The idea of crowdsourcing is actually very simple. If you have more and better ideas at the beginning of the innovation process, at the beginning of the funnel, the chances are higher that, of course, at the end, you will have concepts that are successful and that will lead to successful products on the market. The idea of crowdsourcing, the concept of crowdsourcing is not new. It started already in 2004, and in 2014, we can say it already reached some kind of maturity. Some kind of maturity in the sense that a lot of brands were familiar with the term and used crowdsourcing in one or the other way. Things like this we have seen, I think. This is in the US, Doritos trying to crowdsource a Super Bowl campaign. And the winner, as it is as always in the US, got a gigantic money prize, $1 million. So it's literally outsourcing, if you want, creativity, trying to find the best commercial among your consumers. Over the years, we have seen that there was a shift in what crowdsourcing was being used for. Until 2014, it was more used for content creation, so for creating communication ideas. And we saw a shift in the years 15 and 16 towards more ideation. So we can say that in those years, crowdsourcing became mature. And we also saw that a lot of companies saw, well, maybe it's not really that consumers can give us the big advertising idea, the big comms idea. Maybe it's more about innovation. That's where we probably need it more. That's where we can use it more, because in comms, of course, we will always have our creative agencies who can probably still do a better job. But when it comes to ideas for innovation, that's where it works. That's where those consumers can come up with really innovative and out-of-the-box ideas that lead to very interesting concepts. What is the idea of crowdsourcing? Well, the idea of crowdsourcing is that you are going to use people outside of your organization who are not experienced at all necessarily with your brand and with your industry. And it's the fact that they are a little bit naive that helps them to think out of the box, because people within an organization often see all kinds of limitations and things that are not possible. Those people don't have that because they are from outside of your organization and they have no restrictions in their minds. But the other thing that is important is that we're going to work with really creative consumers. And that's, I think, one of the differences with crowdsourcing, how it traditionally is done. Traditionally, companies were literally putting like some kind of contest on their website, and every consumer could take part. Anyone from outside of the organization could send in an idea for that Super Bowl ad or for a new innovation. Here we invite people, we invite consumers, we invite specific consumers, we invite the most creative consumers. Because if you look at 100 people, 100 consumers, if you want, 90 of them are just ordinary consumers. And those are the people that in most cases we do research with, qualitative research and quantitative research. We also know from the same Forrester study that 9% of the population are people that can see the future, if you want, that are a little bit more at the fringes of consumer behavior, that are a little bit more leading edge, if you want. So those are the people we don't get insights from, like the 90%. Those are the people we can get trends and foresights from. And then 1% of the population can really create. They are really the creative people that actually can help us to bring out of the box ideas into the organization. So that's the difference between how crowdsourcing is normally done. You put something on your website and everybody can participate, and how we do it with our ICA approach. Consumers are invited to take part, and it's only the creative consumers, the creative 1%ers in society, that can take part in that context. And of course, they use their creativity together with the fact that they are a little bit naive when it comes to the topic to come up with out-of-the-box ideas. We have a community of more than 400,000 of those creators, and the community is built based on ads that we put out there. People say, yes, this is something for me. I'm really creative. And then in the first couple of contests, they actually need to prove that they are creative. So it's not some kind of magical scale that we use to identify creativity. I can tell you, we have tried to do that. We have done a lot of research around that, but it's almost impossible. So they have to prove that they are creative by the work that they deliver in the first kind of contests that they take part in. How does it then work? So we actually create a briefing that is a combination of the business objectives and the insights. So Mathilde already talked about the community that we did to gather insights, and then the studio that we created to diffuse insights within the organization. The insight, so the description of the consumer problem, goes into the briefing that we send towards those creative people. But of course, what the business objectives are. So they are in the know of what is it that this company wants to achieve, and what is the consumer problem or the consumer friction described in the insight that we need to solve. And then a competition starts, a competition that usually takes a week or 10 days. There is a moderator who actually moderates what happens on the platform. They are not talking to one another, those creative people, because we know that creativity works best if you come up with your first ideas alone, and only in second instance you start to build on it. But we moderate them to guide them into the right direction, to make sure that we have enough ideas. We stimulate them, and we have high quality ideas. We give them some feedback already in first instance. And at the end of the contest, of course, together with the company, we decide the ideas that we want to take into a workshop, and we decide which ideas that will win a money prize, because it's a contest. So there are 3 ideas that will win a money prize. And of course, by taking part in the contest and by winning the contest, also from a legal point of view, the creators of the ideas hand over the intellectual property. What does it look like, the ideas that they create? Well, something like this. So it has text, it has a visual kind of a visualization, a visual kind of teaser of what the idea might look like, and it's quite detailed. So those people really spend quite some time on working out those ideas. So in most cases, it's way more detailed and way more elaborated on than the usual idea that you get in an internal brainstorm. So Mathilde, can you share with us a little bit what the outcomes were of doing this creative crowdsourcing?
Sure. Hold on, because now
Zoom
technical
isn't technically ready for 21.
So here it's 21.
There we go.
Here. So, and I just want to build on what Tom said. I think it's a combination of having both the creative minds and also them being naive that is super interesting, because then you don't have these internal blockers that I referred to before. So in the end, it really reflected on the results, because we got 67 participants, hyper creative people, and we got more than 100 ideas, and all of them were super creative. They were really out of the box. So then how do you do it when you have 100 ideas? How do you choose, etc.? So we really created these ideas versus the objectives we have for the brand and the challenges we face. And also we merged that with the consumer insights we had. So what was really important is also to have the complement between the consumer insights, the pain points they are experiencing, etc., and these ideas. And also what was super important for the innovation process is that the ideas we got should generate internal excitement. This is key for succeeding in innovation. And this was really the starting point for concept writing workshop, I would say. We did a concept writing workshop. Obviously, this was physical, this one, so it was pre-COVID, but this can also be done digitally. And the aim was really to fine-tune the ideas, combining ideas into new ones. We used consumer insight to turn ideas into concepts, etc. So we had 11 participants for a workshop, and we got 6 concepts that we wanted to test later on. So in terms of the test, if you want to move to the next slide, Tom, we decided to re-inject them to the ongoing online community, so in the square, to really fine-tune concepts with consumers, to check the consumer relevance and the brand fit, and really the potential we know was for us what fits best with the brand, the consumer relevance, and of course, this ability to generate internal excitement. So this closed really the loop in our test. And then for the final ones we chose, we then moved on with more traditional types of things like quantitative testing, etc.
Yeah, I think this approach is really showcasing the power of making use of different crowds in your innovation process. And that's also why we call it 360-degree innovation, this approach, because we started with the 90% of consumers, normal consumers, to generate insights from them. We then moved on to bring those insights into the organization and share it with the many people working on Sillet Bang, by making use of an internal platform. Then after that, we involved a third crowd, being the creative 1%ers, to come up with ideas, and we brought it back into the organization among those employees to start to do curation, and then in a workshop to turn the ideas into real concepts. And we closed the loop by bringing it back again to the 90%, to the target group, to normal consumers. So it's really optimally making use of the different kind of crowds that you can work with, and they each have their role to play. Consumers bring us the insights, the creative people bring us the crazy ideas, and of course the people internally working on Sillet Bang do the matchmaking between the insights and the ideas and turn the ideas into wonderful and strong concepts. So we use each of those different crowds for what they are really good at. We really bring them into their strength. So that was our approach to innovation. Looking forward to the questions that you might have.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mathilde. Excellent, lovely presentation. We do have one question already in the Q&A, if I put it to, and it's a really good start question, I have to say. And how do you initially get a framing of the needs? I mean, once upon a time, we would have thought in terms of the pivotal question, I suppose, the met and unmet needs. So how do you frame the needs on which ideation is focused, defining the problem or goal or desired outcome for the customer?
Yeah.
How do you start?
What we did here in this particular project is after the community, we did some insights writing. So we turned all the observations into strong consumer insights that were, of course, describing the consumer need in a very detailed way. And that insight was also part of the briefing towards the creative community. So they literally had to solve the friction, the unmet needs that was described in the insight. So we used insights to describe that. Maybe Mathilde, you can build on this.
Yeah, I would say that especially when you have a global community like that, working on insights and a very simple one. So we use the insight formula from Insites Consulting that Insites Consulting can share later on if needed. But it's really important because as Insights Consulting says it, it's chunk it to spread it or something like that, or to dunk it. So
Yeah.
it's really to make it short and impactful so that people can really feel the insight. You know, they can feel it personally. And then when you feel it personally, you can be a lot more creative. You can really merge it with a challenge Silent Bank is facing, and you can be in a lot more constructive mindset, I would say.
Okay, so if I understand that properly, there's a pre-stage of research which is informing the or the identification of the need that needs to be met, and then from there you define the core question that's to be addressed, and then you create the support material to elucidate for the end user. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have done research around if you do crowdsourcing not based on an insight, so you are not sharing with the creative crowd the consumer problem that they need to solve, it's much less interesting in terms of the quality of ideas because they go in all directions. So it's super important that in the briefing for creative crowdsourcing, there is that insight. So you need that preface like we did with the community.
Yeah. And what is interesting in this innovation process is the continuous, I would say, communication between the three types of people that Tom mentioned. So the 99, because we internally within RB, we are a bit like the 9, and the 1 hyper creative people. So the spectators, the curators, and the hyper creative people. And you know, in our research process, we described there's a continuous loops between all these three kinds of population, which makes it really richer, I would say.
Excellent. Super answer. Super question, Martin. Well done. What a way to start the day. We've got a question from Viv Harrison. Thanks, Viv. How are the 1%ers rewarded for their time? Is it only the winner that gets a reward?
Yeah, the main reason why they participate is because they love doing this. And indeed, there are only 3 winners, and the 3 winners get a prize. It's usually 500 pounds or euros, then 1,000, and then 1,500. So quite big prizes. So that means that if there were around 70 participants in this ICA contest, only 3 really win something. Yeah, that's correct.
Perfect. Okay, points make prizes. Charlotte Klein is asking, have you used this technique across other industries? How does it work outside of FMCG?
Yeah, we have used this in the world of durables. We have used this for car manufacturers. We have used this even in the pharmaceutical industry. So yes, absolutely. It's cross-industry. It's not only FMCG, although FMCG companies were one of the first to embrace this technique, of course, but we have in the meanwhile done hundreds and hundreds of projects in other sectors as well.
Okay, so entirely the answer I'd have hoped and expected. The question from Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Good morning. Why did you decide not to use the consumers from your panel to co-create solutions?
Because we tried that over and over again, and it doesn't work.
Okay.
Well, even in this project, we tried it. So in the 3 weeks online community, we had one activity is really in 10 years' time, what would be your ideal product, and that kind of projection techniques. And frankly, it was really basic things that they were saying. It was like yeah, there was no way out. So maybe you would find one, I don't know, but in this specific case, we tried and we really felt, so that's why I wanted to do internal ideation, because I said, okay, maybe the consumers don't manage to do it, so maybe we have to do it internally. It didn't work either to the level of what I expected. So then we turned out to the crowdsourcing, I would say.
I think this is the journey that I was on already for the last 15 years, trying to find creativity in the usual consumer, but we have given up, I have to say, because it simply doesn't work. And like Mathilde says, maybe if you have 100 consumers, you find one great idea or one person who can do it, and that's because that person is a creative 1%er. So that's why we said, let's just stop trying to do it. Let's use everybody in their strength. Consumers are there to give us insights, creative people are there to give us ideas, and we will find those creative people and work with those creative people only for ideation. And also the people internally have their role to play. Maybe people internally can come up with some nice ideas, but they can use the help of external creative people to get more and better ideas. And that's okay, because the real strength, I think, of people in an organization is turning those ideas together with the insights into very strong concepts. That's the real strength, the concept writing and the mixing and matching of ideas and adding stuff to ideas so that they become those great concepts. So that's, I think, the real learning of this 360-degree innovation process. It's use the different crowds, like Mathilde mentioned, for what they are really great at.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, I'm aware of time. Tom, that's a super answer. Mathilde, super answer as well. So basically what you're telling us is you have, over time, developed a process that you've distilled, and that with this refined process, you've learned along the way. There have been some dead ends, but now you have a process.
Absolutely. It was trial and error, and finally we have found the ideal process. Yeah,
the best way to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Look, that's a super presentation. Thank you very much. I'm sure that's captured everyone's attention this morning, but we're going to have to move on to the second presentation. So Tom, Mathilde, thank you ever so much. That was a delightful way to start the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.
And you, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, those soft, mellifluous French tones. It's a nice way to start things. And Tom's voice was lovely too. So next session, moving on quickly. Stop rambling, Tom. Second session is going to be led by Hannah Rogers of Blue Yonder. Now, we first met Hannah at the Quirks event back in February. A number of you would have been at that. And we were enthralled by her exuberance and enthusiasm. And here today, we're delighted to bring that vitality to an Aura seminar. Hannah will share the essence of a new innovation process, XM, which they co-created with a global FMCG giant. You can start to guess who that is if you care to, who would have loved to be here with us today, but sadly can't. So Hannah will reveal how the process has transformed the way this global giant works and how it has earned buy-in amongst the C-suite. Again, just a reminder, put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll address them after the presentation. And do remember that you're going to be rating the event at the end of the session this morning. So Hannah, can I figuratively hand you the mic?
Hello, thank you very much, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Hope you can hear me okay.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, one of the challenges of my exuberance is sometimes I will start talking too fast. So if I get too excited and too hyper, Tom, just tell me to slow down and shut up.
I will.
Don't do subtlety. But no, thank you so much for listening. And I've got a few things to talk through. So I want to show you precisely what we did. And as Tom said, unfortunately, our client could be with us, but I'll share as much as I can. So we want to talk about designing for superiority. And we're using this example because we're using innovation, or we're taking innovation and looking at something superior in existing categories. Obviously, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes we need to create new categories and completely do something groundbreaking. But today we're going to focus on, you've got a concept, you've got an idea, we need to make it superior. And we really want to talk about something called edges. So in order to deliver superiority, we obviously need to meet the needs. That's a given. We need to meet the basic fundamental consumer or customer needs. Then what we need to do is we need to delight and differentiate. We need to push and keep pushing. And sometimes it's just in these little details. So the first thing I'm going to do, bravely or stupidly, is I'm going to try and show you a video to sum up what I mean. So fingers crossed, turn your volume up. Hopefully you've all got it up because I'm talking a lot of interest. But if not, you can let me know.
The biggest battle of our professional lives. We're in hell right now, believe me. We can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell, 1 inch at a time. You find out life's this game of inches. The margin for error is so small, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. Hell yeah. They're in every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the f***ing difference between winning and losing.
And I think very much the premise is now more than ever, and that's a phrase we've seen all year, now more than ever, things are changing. And you see by this delicious banana bread, which I'd never heard of before February, that things have adapted, they've moved on, needs have moved on. And what we're seeing is these smaller companies with their innovative solutions are getting the advantage. And obviously one innovative small company doesn't make much difference. But when you get a lot of them all together with very little processes, very little red tape, they move quickly. And very quickly we see them move and bend and change the categories that we're working in into different directions. And all of a sudden, good enough doesn't cut it. We need to go further. We need to really work out what competitive advantage looks like, sounds like, and delivers, and make the most of it. We need to deliver superiority. And this quote, you know, often there's arguments about whether it's a misquote or not. The whole is greater than the sum of parts. And this is what really matters. Everything we research, everything we experience needs to be holistic. And the examples I can give range from FMCG with, you know, a deodorant. You don't just have a product that keeps you wet or dry. You have a fragrance, you have a pack that's easy to open and close, you have an offer in the supermarket, you have a disposal, you have a sensation, ladies, when you might shave under your arms, you have that stinging sensation. And you know, I recently went through a mortgage process. That wasn't just dealing with a bank, it was multiple layers of telephone calls and multiple options, conveyances, complex forms, a banking app, all of those things together. Another example is when I get on a train, the actual train journey itself is fine. Yes, I'm not a huge fan of crumbs on counters, but actually the pain points, the bits that matter, the holisticism for me, are bits where I have to run across King's Cross. Am I going to make that training time? I've got 3 minutes because it doesn't show up. That's a pain point. That's something I can't stand. You know, that fear of how easy is it to open the door? That's a pain point. Actually understanding, have I hit the right train ticket? Do I need my credit card, or can I use a company credit card to pick up my ticket? All those little bits transform that single one experience, and it's much of the bigger picture. And this was what's so revolutionary about this methodology. It's absolutely holistic. So I think you'll probably look at this and think there's nothing new, but the challenge I have to companies and our clients is look at ourselves, really ask ourselves, are we really doing this? Are we actually aligned to a single shared vision where every single function, every single team within the company is working together? And we know what that final vision is. We know the little parts that make up that whole. This middle part is often where it goes wrong, because teams start working independently. Yes, it's towards the same goal, but what we find is sometimes it's a little bit out of sync. And then at the end, obviously, we do always try and bring it back to a view to create a single shared vision. But again, often it is too late. What the hell are we going to do? We've spent all this money, we've spent all this time to find out. But actually what we've got is something which is 80% there, 90% there, but it's not perfect, it's not superior. So we designed this process, and traditionally big FMCG companies and a lot of our more experienced service-based clients have invested very heavily in the back end of research. You do your concept testing, it's great, it works fantastic, and then you start running quite chunky projects. Let's get this off the ground, and then at the end you invest in huge checks, disaster checks, gross negatives checks, and they say to us, oh my god, no, it's wrong, go back, go back, go back. But that's risky. The investment's in the wrong place. So what we're doing is bringing that to the front, moving quickly, moving iteratively, making sure you've got the understanding there. So obviously the first bit is that full team to find the vision, which we can talk a bit later on. The second bit is this really game-changing part. It's understanding superiority, understanding excellence. It's holistic, it's in-depth understanding. This is where you invest. This is where you need to make sure we get it right. Second bit, part 3 is actually using what we've learned to work back in functions, smaller iterative steps, cheaper, faster, better. You can have all 3. And then obviously finally going back to align, to bring that in, to make sure we've got 360 degrees understanding, to make sure when it matters, that moment of truth, when we deliver the product, service, it is absolutely superior. And the first bit is this holistic understanding. So this is where we are now and versus the closest competition. And again, remember that on this example, I'm not talking about creating a new category or a new service. I'm talking about being superior and winning in the one that you're currently playing in. And what this does, it tells us where to focus time, effort, and budget. And when we think about who you need to understand your performance against, I'm just going to show you this because think about it. The biggest threat to a pizza is actually a fish finger. They meet the same need. Busy people use them in the same way. And the advantage to a pizza is that you don't have to turn it. And something that simple really changes the game when we're thinking about competition. It's by wallet share. And the real thing is here, think about why you exist, not what you do. That's the biggest help I can probably give you. Think about what your purpose is, what you're hoping to deliver to customers, to consumers, and that will tell you who you need to be benchmarking against. And this is some of it. So this is an example output, but this is what we call experience mapping. You've probably seen experience mapping before, but this is like experience mapping on steroids because it's much more holistic. This is a digital community. Again, it is recruiting consumers. Yes, communicative, articulate, but fundamentally, these are people. These are experiencing something. And in their own words, they tell us what matters to them. So the first part in this example was a digital IDI. Tell us what matters to you about this product. What matters? What moments delight? What moments do we need to nail to make you think it's superior, to tell you it's excellent? And they told us. And then what you do over a 2-week period is you use video diary ethnography, we use mood boards, you use projective techniques such as emotional farewell letters, which were absolutely hysterical in some of the more commodity-based categories we're working in, but it's very powerful stuff. And what you get to see is the relative importance of all these attributes, all these moments, right from that first pre-use, at the moment you think you're going to buy something, to disposal. In experience examples and service examples, it can be about disposal, repair, customer service, buying something, all of those tiny touch points. We map out what matters when. Importantly, we map out what ideal looks like. What is that superiority? What should we be aiming for? Stake in the ground stuff. And then we show exactly where you hit those marks versus the competition. So again, it's are you delighting? Don't play with this, guys. This is perfect. Or how can we improve? What are the tweaks? And here, when you look across, who has got the competitive advantage and what do we need to take back from them? And this is sometimes, you might think what matters is that something looks like it's soft and gentle and curvy and caring, and it's got a lovely curved pack design. If that won't fit in your cupboard, that's going to annoy the hell out of you and you're not going to buy it again. You've handed a competitor the edge, and it's these tiny details that are making the difference. And obviously, when you've got this, you're knowing exactly where to focus time, effort and budget. You know, don't worry about investing in that website. Don't worry about making sure that cap opens or closes like this. It's all about, this is where you need to focus and this is what it needs to look like. And you're looking at practical, emotional and cultural implications as well. So feel, look, sound and brands, services, products, lives. And I think it's worth saying that, you know, sometimes companies' models are minimal viable products, it's MVP. But again, even with that, you're looking at what really matters. Just get that bit right and you will fly. Obviously, the next step beyond this is to understand what communicates what really matters. And we call these sort of guardrails, parameters. This is about working out what it sounds like. And I will say, you know, in this example, it's more FMCG. If you're looking at what's premium or basic or long-lasting fragrance, short-lasting fragrance, whatever it is, you could just be looking at the viscosity of a product, the way a cap opens. It's getting all these attributes together, every little bit, and making sure that you pack opening, closing, the viscosity, the colour, your brand, your comms, all those bits layered together. If you haven't designed a website, you know, you can do this with different stimulus. The stimulus you use is a medium of the product. And you map it out with consumers. You know, in a digital world, we can still do this digitally. Layer it, layer it, layer it. Keep asking them, okay, so what about this element? What does it look like? Look beyond your category. What can we learn? How can we learn it and bring it all together? Because then what you get is this clear definition of superiority. You know what it looks like, and you have a range of examples which ladder up to communicate that. And I think it's quite interesting because you don't want to go too narrow here, because the danger is it stops design teams, it prevents disruptive innovation. You need to keep them within an acceptable range, so acceptable to ideal, because when all these elements are laddered up on top of each other, that's when you deliver superiority. So you need to allow a little bit of wiggle room. We don't want to stifle creativity too much. And again, one of, I think, my biggest frustrations with the industry as a whole is sometimes we move very slowly. We can move quicker. If we are focused, if we know exactly where we need to be, we know what superiority looks like, we know what excellence is. So why can't we work cheaper, faster and better? Be focused, spend 5-6 grand, take 5 days. You're sense checking, you know what you're aiming for. And this is about agility. I mean, it's a word that the industry uses all the time, but I think what it really means is being fast, being smart, stay focused. If you've got 2 or 3 objectives, that's probably too many. Have 1 or 2, a really core objective. If it's, I'm using FMCG example again, but effectively, if your example is right, what's the lead option for this pack design? Great. Focus on that. Don't worry about the exploratory stuff. You've done that. Let's find the lead option out of 4 or 5 different prototypes. Same for website, same for service concept. And again, take risks early on. One of the biggest advantages to moving to this model is that you don't waste time, effort or money. If someone has an idea that is off the wall, you see it sitting with the needs, you see it sitting with the experience map and within the parameters, but you're not sure if it's a goer, do it early on, play, let's learn from it, because you never know where that takes you. And I think the other thing, and this, when I first said this to someone, it was a bit controversial, but use qual and quant KPIs. When you're talking to your friends, when you're talking to your colleagues, how do you know that they like something? They haven't done a quant survey. They've told you, yes, that's a good idea. They've used the language, they've played that language back to you that we've seen in that stake in the ground experience map. So you know you're on the right track. And obviously, if you think back to that initial model I showed you, which was the first align, work within your functions, and then bring it back together, we're still in this middle test bit, working within teams, working within functions. So we need to make sure this isn't the danger zone, this isn't where we diverge. So every single little project that you do, whether it's 5 grand, whether it's 20, 30, 80, whatever it is you need to keep this rule of 2 in mind. So you have your core objective, which for example is, which is the lead option? What packaging should I use? What graphic design should it be? Your secondary objective needs to be expectations of key touch points. So it could be about, well, what would it smell like? Great, we're talking about packaging design, we want a lead option, but we're looking at this holistically. Remember, all those touch points need to add up to 100% to deliver superiority. To bring it back to that experience map, what are those key points that matter, and ask those questions too. And it can be 5 minutes if it's qual, it can be 5 questions if it's quant, but make sure we do it, and make sure we update the whole team on feedback as well. So it's like, hang on, if you need to, pause. If you've got out of line, pause, pivot, progress. But it's working holistically. It's making sure we haven't gone too far away from that initial shared vision and what really matters. And obviously the final part of it is these holistic checks. It's reviewing against the whole concept. It's getting it back into consumers' hands. This can be qual, quant, ethnography. The methodology very much depends on what stakeholders need to see. I'm a firm believer in that projects, you need to design to meet the objective, you need to hit budget, but you need to give your stakeholders things that they believe in. Obviously, I love qual. You can tell I'm a waffly, talky person. I love qual, but sometimes people need numbers. Give them what they need, give them the evidence, but check against the concept, that shared vision, and crucially go back to your experience map. Have you hit those moments that matter? Have you really delivered superiority at all of those? Because if you have, you will fly. The 3 things you really need to make this work are, first of all, this clear vision of where you need to get to, you know, signed off at the senior level. The second point is very, very brutal, but you've got to be able to take feedback, and it hurts. And the first time we did this, and the reason this has flown and changed the way of working this global giant, is because we had VPs in there, we had directors in there across R&D functions, brand, marketing, category teams. They were all in there, and they all sat there, and the directors and VPs went, "Oh my God, yes." Because they were big enough, they were the global giants, they're leading, they knew that this was what they needed to hear, not what they wanted to hear, but they did something about it, they acted on it, which was fantastic. I mean, sometimes it feels pretty terrible, but it doesn't matter, we can get through it. And then the other thing is to understand and accept the importance of detail, and I beg you all to go off into your own lives and find out those little bits that have let you down, that they don't, if you were designing something, you wouldn't necessarily pay attention, but to you it's pivotal. And I think my final thoughts on this is, it's more going back to the big picture and innovation as a whole, because it is, innovation doesn't have to be something huge or expensive or even, you know, technological and advanced or complex. It needs to be new, different, recontextualized. But the true bit is, as with this whole designing for superiority experience map, it's got to have a genuinely meaningful impact, moments that matter. This example was something brilliant. This is my friend installed an outside hot tap on his wall to wash his dog and wash his car. That is innovation, that's game changing, that's an edge, that meets a need. And that's me done. So look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. I don't think you can ever be accused of waffling. That was like a tsunami of thoughts there. Thank you for that. That's great. Some questions have popped in, so let's turn to those. Martin Silcock's very active this morning. Hi, Martin. Martin agrees with holistic thinking, how to break internal company people out of just seeing their part of people's lives and process, especially if they can't influence aspects of the process, say that another company affects, for example. He then goes on to ask, how does qualitative and quantitative information play a role and used in the holistic approach and capturing superiority?
Very, very good question. I think it all depends on the specific test objectives and the product themselves. I tend to use qual where we need to obviously dig deeper, and we often combine it with ethnography, because sometimes obviously you're saying something's easy to use or it's fantastic, but you're watching someone open something with a teeth or the screwdriver, so you know there's actually an issue. With the quant, it's often combining it with the qual. So use the qual to get the questions, get the moment, and often using the quant to get the evidence behind it. And I think quant sometimes depends on the audience as well. Some of the people that we talk to for the product, they actually prefer the closed responses. They actually prefer, like, I just need to put these in some sort of order. But if you do the qual first, you make sure you've got the right language, because you don't ask the right questions, you don't ask the right get the right answers. And the final point in that, I tend to use quant as well a little bit further down the line, where stakeholders are saying, great, I love the qual, I've got the detail, what I need is to go to my investors and prove it with numbers. So I tend to use that a little later on.
Cool, thank you, lovely response. Martin has another question. Yeah, gosh, and another one afterwards. So this next one is, how do expectations of consumers affect how they think about superiority? How do you capture this aspect of CX?
Don't think I quite understand the question. Could I have a little bit more detail, please?
That's all I have from Martin. How do expectations of consumers affect how they think about superiority? Okay, shall we park that one, Hannah, because I'm not entirely sure either. Martin goes on to say, is the experience map the key framework for seeing things holistically? How is it created, and does it need to exist first?
Yes, okay, very good point. So we've done it two ways. So sometimes we've done it the second thing, sometimes we've done it the first thing. Where we do it as the first thing, it's where we've already got an existing category. And yes, this is the route to superiority. So what we do is it's often a 2-3 week in-home usage test. They'd use their current product at the moment. Sometimes you give them the product using the second week, but it's a process of video diaries, in-depth interviews, mood boards, collages, laddering it up. And then you analyse it on a qual level, pulling all those differences out. You have 8 people using your product, 8 a competitor, 8 another competitor, and so on. And you layer this insight on top of each other. Where we're doing a existing category, we tend to do it first. Where we're doing a new category, what we do is create innovation in new ways to then put into this. So consumer-centric innovation, let's get them to tell us what their needs are. Let's do something like this. But the second part of that is, let's do some extreme prototyping. Let's see if we can create needs and change behaviour by putting it into their hands, bringing the elements together, then doing the experience mapping to see where that layers across it. Probably not very clear answer, but I'm happy to pick up the conversation.
Actually, what I was going to suggest to Martin was, Martin, if you care to use the chat box to expand upon the question that we struggled to interpret, then perhaps there could be an exchange between you and Hannah in the chat box. That would work, I think. Hannah, I think I heard the term holisticism from you earlier. I've never heard that before.
Might have made it up, but then Shakespeare made it work, so I think it's okay.
Share of wallet and experience mapping on steroids. Also, some lovely principles there. Hannah, there are no more questions. A lovely presentation. Thank you for joining us this morning. Really enjoyed it. Are you going to stay on the line, perhaps, in case that exchange comes in?
Yeah, absolutely.
From Martin, that would be cool. Okay, so thank you, Hannah, ever so much.
Thank you.
Lovely to hear you this morning. Moving on to presentation number 3. This morning, it's the final of our trio of presentations here this morning. This presentation is coming to you from Paul Lawson and Richard Preedy of Verve. The title of the presentation is Human-Centric Innovation for Less Time and Money. This seems to be an indication of the times in which we live. People are at the heart of the best innovation, and any innovation process needs to put them and their needs right at the centre. So Verve are going to share their approach to digital innovation, how to harness the value of online conversations and deliver best practice co-creation in an agile way. The buzz term of the modern age. Are we ready? Paul, Richard?
Yeah, we sure are. And hopefully everyone can hear us. Yeah.
Loud and clear. Over to you.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name's Paul. It's lovely to be speaking to you all this morning. So yeah, myself and my colleague Rich are going to spend the next 20 minutes or so chatting to you about how we support kind of human-centric innovation in a smart and flexible and digital-first way. I'll remove the buzzword of agile there. The obvious point to make first off is that getting people to listen to you talk about how you use digital research tools and techniques to support innovation is a lot easier in November 2020 than it was in November 2019. That is a fact, but it's also a fact that this isn't a COVID-19 approach, and it's not really a COVID-19, well, it's not at all a COVID-19 presentation. It's our very strong belief, and it's our experience, that the philosophy and the approaches that we'll describe here, they help our clients deliver better innovation. It's not good innovation in spite of not being able to use a whole bunch of other techniques because of COVID. It's better because the approaches are digital. And it's those digital approaches that enable us to support the innovation in a kind of more contemporary and agile way, and enables us to match the kind of pace and processes that our clients are working with. So let's tell you a little bit about why. I think two things, I guess, at a very broad level stand out to us in terms of driving great innovation. I think the first one's pretty easy, and it probably looks pretty obvious. The human context matters. I think, this is one where most people, I'd be pretty confident that most people on this call would kind of volunteer that as an answer if I'd have done it as a little quiz, which we've all been very fond of over the past 6 months. So, the human context is something that drives our entire business. It's not just about our approach to innovation, actually. But we use the word obsess intentionally because it's only about obsessively studying and learning about how consumers live their lives that we can truly understand the sort of territories and pain points that we're innovating for. But again, most of us on this session would probably say that was true 5, 10 or 15 years ago, or maybe even longer. It's not particularly new thinking. However, the thinking around the best way to develop new products and services within businesses has changed drastically over the last 5, 10 or 15 years. And one example of that we think makes a really good reference point is Eric Ries's The Lean Startup. So while extolling the virtues of speaking to customers early, the process of quick and continuous iteration and development is challenging for traditional research methods. So according to Eric, customer insight remains critical, but only if you can deliver it in the way and at the pace that's required. What that means is that research needs to adapt for product development in a modern world. And that's the jumping off point really for our approach to innovation. We start with established approaches, basically. And we do that because actually that's what a lot of our clients are using in order to drive their own innovation processes. And so therefore, the way we work needs to be in sync with that. We're showing the double diamond here, which I think a lot of people on this webinar will be familiar with. But the approaches that we're going to describe here today work equally well with a whole bunch of other kind of design thinking led ways of working. So we start with these design thinking led ways of working. And then what we did was look at what value insight can add throughout this process. And we completely reevaluated and redeveloped all of our tools and techniques in order to be able to deliver the same quality of insight and data at each point, but to be able to do it more quickly and to be able to do it actually more cost effectively too. So whether we're kind of looking at the early stages where we're identifying opportunities and territories, or whether we're then developing kind of ideas based on jobs to be done framework in the design stage, or whether we're then kind of, developing those concepts further, or actually, helping you to launch them in market successfully at the deliver stage. The key point is that we're delivering research processes that work and are designed specifically for this type of design thinking led way of working. We're not taking traditional research methods and trying to make them fit with the way that our clients are working. Now, obviously, there are a huge number of use cases that we could talk about for this type of work. And while we'd love to say that we always start right at the beginning with territory development and then we work from there, the reality is that that's just not always practical. So for the remainder of this presentation, we're going to focus on 3 key areas, and each one of them supports needs at a different stage of the innovation process. So in the first instance, we'll look at how we can help you identify territories. So looking at the white spaces and then landing them in the business and kickstarting that ideation process. and to talk to the kind of pace of the process. This one can be done in 8 days. Secondly, we're assuming that some work's already been done. And here what we're doing is looking at mining existing territories and generating appealing and what's really important is generating commercially viable concepts that focus on the specific human problems that we're looking to solve. Again, here, this approach can be delivered in around about 15 days. Finally, we'll look at how we can take existing ideas and make sure that they're delivered successfully in market. And again, this is an approach that's delivered in around about 15 days. So 3 areas that we'll talk to you about in a bit more detail. I think the other kind of key thing that these 3 areas help us do is actually demonstrate some of the benefits of a digital first approach. So in the first instance, where we're developing territories, what we can actually do is use digital to enable us to access thousands and thousands of conversations rather than just talking to tens of people. In the second instance, where we're then developing our kind of ideas based on a jobs to be done framework, digital enables us to tailor our approach, offering us a huge variety of different tools and techniques that enable us to kind of really understand and get under the skin of what consumers are doing and what the kind of tensions and challenges are. And in the third instance, digital is brilliant because the third instance is all about iteration. And we think actually digital first approaches can do iteration better than most other methodologies. So 3 really important ways that digital makes this process better, not just good while other things aren't around. And what I'm going to do now is pass on to Rich, who's going to basically take you through a little bit more detail on each of these.
Thanks, Paul. So as Paul said, this first module, and actually all of the modules we're going to look at, are about ensuring that innovation work are ultimately grounded in human truth and these genuine consumer needs. And that said, as a starting point, this first module, this first stage, is less about primary research and more about identifying broad territories and areas to potentially play in before we identify those more specific consumer needs within the category or product area you're specifically looking at. This is very much about the blank or almost blank piece of paper scenario. And the process described here, it's really about working with our clients to identify those broad innovation territories. We're still aiming to create these through exploring human needs and the trends that exist in the world around us. But this is more of an internal-led approach in which we balance those human needs with the internal expertise on possibilities and where the brand can credibly play. So some of the presentations earlier referenced the importance of the innovation process being led by designers and creatives, and this is very much bringing them into this initial stage. Now, typically an ideation process like this might take months to deliver. As Paul sort of referenced earlier, digital approaches now enable us to do this much quicker. And here we're using AI-enabled technology through a partner platform to analyze existing online content. So whether that's trends, blogs, expert opinion, and this helps us to identify springboards for innovation based on the initial hypotheses that we uncover. The sources that we can use will number in the thousands from across the globe. We're not limited by geography or time to identify these different sources. And they can include lifestyle blogs, forums, expert reviews, thought pieces from experts, sourced from all over the world. Now, doing this curation piece and using this platform and technology helps us shape the initial hypotheses that the team have come up with for innovation. Essentially, we can use these rich and diverse online sources to stretch the level of understanding that already exists within a client business. And once we have the sort of key themes and drivers and potential springboards for innovation, we collaborate with clients through workshops to identify which of the territories that we've uncovered actually represents the most potential. And I think, as Paul said, typically this process, we can cover this in as little as 8 days. So to start from that blank piece of paper to get into a point where there's some areas and territories for innovation from. Typically, this might require lots and lots of sort of primary research, spending time with consumers in markets and speaking to people to get to this information. But actually, because of the wealth of information that's already exists online, we can get to a really good starting place without going through that stage, and therefore kickstart that innovation process more quickly than we might otherwise been able to do. So, and just to help to kind of bring this to life a little bit, we're going to share some examples for each of these modules about how this can work. Now, being innovation work, much of what we're talking about here is confidential, so we can't share too much information on the specific clients or the granular detail on the projects. But we wanted to give you some examples of how these modules work to help bring each of these work streams to life, essentially. From this initial territory work, we have an example from a tech and media client who are looking to identify opportunities for improvement within the world of photo taking and social media sharing. The key here was using that discovery phase that I outlined on the previous slide to really explore the underlying human motivations as to why people share photos, the drivers that shape what we share with whom and why, to identify future growth opportunities. We then combine this with primary research, actually speaking to social media fanatics, so those sort of experts that have been referenced elsewhere today, to understand more about what people are doing now and why, and help to identify some of those pain points. But again, this was a digital first approach, and that help discovery phase really helped to give us those springboards for identifying themes or areas that we could then explore through the subsequent phase of primary research. So moving on to the next phase. This module is more about moving from those broader innovation territories into creating more tangible concept and product ideas. And as Paul referenced earlier, we ground a lot of this in the jobs to be done theory. Now, I think has been sort of alluded to at various points today. Consumers won't necessarily tell us what the specific product is they want, but what they can tell us is about the gaps, the tensions, the needs, and the pain points in their lives. They can essentially identify the problems, and that's across all of their lives, not just within a specific product category. So that holistic view, that understanding of everything in their lives, and they can talk about how they want to improve their lives, even if they don't know the solution to do that necessarily. The best innovations will essentially solve those human problems. And that's where the jobs to be done theory has been so established over the past few years. Now, the jobs that you identify from this are more likely to be intangible, sort of based in emotion. What we're not looking to do here through this work is identify functional product needs or activities or tasks per se. Those jobs to be done tend to be more emotion-led. So people look for a better way to express themselves, for example, or want to find a better way to stay motivated when exercising. This is what the jobs are. We're trying to identify those underlying motivations, which then provide the spark to help with the innovation process. And I think jobs to be done theory has become sort of well-renowned and identified over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. But this whole theory has stretches back many years, and I think it was the founder of Revlon who encapsulated this back in 1952. They said in the factory we make cosmetics, but in the drugstore we sell hope. And that idea of selling hope, that's the job. That's the job we're trying to meet. That's the problem we're trying to solve for consumers. And we should be thinking like that when we're identifying which products and innovations we're trying to come up with for our consumers. What's that underlying benefit and need that they have? So our process here again would start with internal hypotheses sessions. So working with our clients to work out which are the innovation territories that we may have identified in the previous stage to then ideate from. But here we start to integrate that primary consumer research, at the heart of which is a digital mobile ethnography approach. Again, we want to understand consumer lives within a particular territory, but everything about their lives in that territory to understand those motivations and gaps. We can then bring participants back together for those co-creation sessions to start creating concept boards based around reasons to believe. Now, essentially, again, while we bring those participants back, we very much see this as co-creation. We want the designers and the creatives in the room to speak to consumers, but it's the designers and creatives who are coming up with the ideas. We're just using the consumers to feed back on them, to give us their view of how that would help to fit within their lives or not. Again, this process, the way we set this up and using this digital ethnography approach can take as little as 15 days. And don't get us wrong, it's quite an intense 15 days, sort of starting from hypothesis to concepts, but it's still 15 days nonetheless. And it can be a really powerful way to get some of those new concepts into the business and start to work out how they can be launched and optimized for the future. And a great real world example of this actually came from a project we ran for a retail client who was looking to expand into some adjacent services, so not within their core sort of remit or core kind of skill set or what they would normally be established with. The first port of call here was on understanding which of the adjacent services made most sense and represented the greatest opportunity for them. Where could they credibly play? So through a series of online ethnography projects, we started to uncover the needs and pain points across a number of different categories that consumers told us about. We were then able to actually quantify the size of each of those pain points, essentially trying to reflect the opportunity. And then we were able to overlay the credibility or the right to play that the brand might have within that, within each of those opportunity areas. the extent of this stretch that a brand might have to undertake in order to be seen credibly there. And then once we're able to do that, we could then move into this co-creation and start to ideate the specific products and services that they might be able to deliver. But it very much started with the problem and the consumer pain point first of all, before we went into that phase. We needed to understand whether what we were coming up with here actually solved a genuine consumer need or not. If it didn't, we dropped it and we moved on to something else. So finally, moving into that final module. And this is very much about refining and optimizing concept to get them ready for launch, essentially ensuring that the best ideas don't fail through flawed execution. And again, digital approaches here allow us to be more agile, to use that buzzword. But essentially, what the digital approaches give us is a chance to be more iterative in our concept development, to give our clients the best chance of a successful launch. Essentially, by using collaborative approaches, we can fine-tune and finesse ideas as we go. It's not a case of, as it might have been a few years ago, that we put a concept in front of consumers, we get their feedback, and then we just have to use that and develop it from there. This is about going back and testing and retesting, sometimes with the same participants and sometimes with fresh participants, depending what we're looking to do. Essentially, it's about taking the best, the big idea, as we defined it here, writing up via a number of different options with different hooks that we can then test with people via digital communities. And the other key point here is, again, we very much encourage that throughout this whole process, those product designers and creative teams are there every step of the way. So they join into those online communities, they participate in the discussions. And by doing so, they can look to identify hooks and issues and essentially create new versions of those products and big ideas for further refinement. We can then take the building blocks that we identify, work with those participants and teams collaboratively to put those blocks together and help to shape the propositions. And while the approach here is more qualitative in nature that I've described, again, it's very much designed to explore and tease out the barriers to take up. It can also be supported by quantitative validation too. And I think, as the previous presentation said, combining those two elements, getting those robust numbers on some of the concepts as well as the exploratory piece, is really, really critical for providing that confidence that we have the right building blocks to take forward into those products as we look to take them to market. Again, using those digital approaches means we can have that sort of iterative feedback and collaborative approach over a couple of weeks, rather than having to wait a month to get that consumer feedback. So finally, just an example, I think, of that iterative process and that idea of refining and taking concepts out to market. A great example from earlier this year, actually, for a CPG client. And in this case, they had a big idea, but they weren't sure if it was the right big idea. Essentially, in this case, the CEO of the company had a creative brainwave on a flight and created a number of different scripts and angles for a new campaign that they were looking to launch. And whilst this new campaign was about promoting a new product ostensibly, it also was actually looking to reevaluate and reposition some of their core brand proposition and values, and therefore was going to be used throughout creative development in TV and media throughout the whole of this year. But on this flight, they'd sort of come up with 5 to 7 potential versions of this big idea they wanted to test, but they needed to know which were the right ones. What was the consumer appetite for hearing these ideas? So what followed here was a creative whirlwind of workshops that we were able to feed the consumer voice into. Now, again, those workshops were led by the creative agency and the creatives within the company and the product designers and developers. But what we were able to do was bring that customer voice into the room throughout that sort of week-long whirlwind of workshops, by making sure that consumer insights were used throughout to test what the ideas that were coming forward, to test the revised ideas and iterate some of those design concepts that were coming through. Essentially, by doing so, we were able to add touches of authenticity and credibility to the approaches and the innovations that the team were coming up with. So rather than the consumer voice being reduced to a mere box ticking exercise, it was really helping to validate and inform the creative work that was taking place over the course of that week. So again, a really powerful way to ensure the consumer voice stays at the heart of any innovation work. But crucially, as Paul said up front, it doesn't slow down that process. That creative process happened as it was going to anyway, but we were able to just feed it in throughout, rather than people having to wait to hear what consumers said. And that's all made possible by a variety of those digital approaches and platforms that we have available to get that consumer feedback very, very quickly and feed it in the right way. So I think that was about 20 minutes. Apologies if I spoke quickly as we went through there. We had quite a lot to cover, but we'd like to now hear any questions or thoughts people had on what we've shared today.
That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you both. Lovely presentation. And yes, exactly 20 minutes. I think you must have practiced that one. It looks to me as if Martin's had an extra Weetabix this morning, because Martin Silcott has asked another question. Great stuff. What does the big idea tend to cover in types of content elements that are tested? Richard, Paul?
Sorry, I was just on, realised I'm muting myself there.
Oh, I do that all the time.
So, I mean, the big idea essentially, it will depend on by the nature of the product or the concept or what it is we're looking to test. I mean, in that last example, that was more about campaign and positioning, sort of big ideas, but it can just be as simple as the concept itself we're looking to test. Essentially, whatever it is, there will be one fundamental big idea of the new product or the new positioning, whatever it is. But that process is about creating different versions of that big idea that we can then share with consumers and ordinary people. And each of those each versions of those ideas will have a different hook. We want to make them work out how to make that big idea accessible, essentially, to people. So we'll use product and creative teams to help generate, I guess, different versions of that big idea, and also identify the building blocks that make up that big idea. And then what we do is take those different building blocks and feed those into the research and the primary consumer feedback, essentially, to test them. And then it's all about really just once we've got those different articulations of that big idea, is testing them for comprehension and relevance and barriers, essentially. So when you put those different ideas in front of people, it's understanding why doesn't this work, or why does this work, and really breaking that big idea apart into different modules, I think, to then essentially identify which version of that big idea will be the most compelling route. But I think how you articulate that big idea will essentially vary by the nature of the work you're doing at that stage, the type of the product, the concept, or the creative idea that is being tested, and how you articulate that vary by category and industry as well. So there's no one way to I guess articulate the big idea, but we think it's really important that you're not trying to test too much when you're getting into this stage. You need to have a clear focus on what that one compelling idea is, even if you have different articulations of it.
Okay, I do. There are no more questions in the Q&A box at the moment. No, I tell a lie. Martin has asked another one. Okay, so big idea broken out into different expressions. Thanks. Actually, it's more a statement of recognition and thank you for your answer, Ideal. I have a perhaps slightly prosaic question, which is, you mentioned the term territories, and just for clarity, so that everybody who's listening in is on the same page, what do you mean exactly by territories? Some people do have slightly different interpretations.
So by territories here, I think we mean those broader areas or themes that we might then want to use as springboards for innovation. So not before you get too granular into specific product solutions or product ideas or answers essentially to a question. This is more about where could we play. So for example, I think if you were creating new earphones, for example, or trying to come up with innovations for earphones, you might try and understand, okay, there might be a territory here which is about using earphones to help people exercise, or it might be one about helping people to stay motivated, or it might be one to help people concentrate. So you try to identify those kind of broad areas where there might be an opportunity for innovation based on sort of underlying motivations and needs. And then once you've said, okay, we think the motivation territory feels like an important one, the exercise motivation territory, you then move into, okay, what are the existing pain points within that territory and how do we innovate from that point? So the territory is essentially the broad landscape or theme for the idea of where you want to start that innovation from.
Super. Thank you very much for that. We have one final question we can respond to. It's from Alison Chan. Thank you, Alison. And the question is, can these techniques be applied to B2B customers? What adaptations are needed if it can?
I mean, it absolutely can. I think ultimately, if you think about the different stages of it, I think in the first instance, as opposed to kind of, applying it to, at the earlier stage, it's less about applying it to B2B customers and more about kind of understanding what conversations and what topic areas that we might want to be targeting. As we work through the process, I think, interestingly, one of the things that we've discovered over the last kind of 3 or 4 years is that actually being able to engage B2B audiences with these types of activities in terms of using kind of 1 or 2 week pop-up communities to run kind of multiple activities that might help us to kind of understand some of the experiences that they have and what their wants and needs are and things do work. And actually, I think one of the kind of myths that we like to try and bust is the idea that actually in B2B people don't have the time or won't commit the time to kind of participating in that way. What we've actually found is that it works just as well, because ultimately what we can do is set these things up in a way that enable those customers to participate at times that is appropriate for them. So absolutely they can. And certainly I think when you get to the kind of the more the developmental kind of aspects of this type of approach, actually we get a lot of engagement, because if you position these types of activities in the right way, B2B customers, they have problems that they need to be solved, and they're quite willing, if you do it in the right way, to kind of share their opinions on it, and particularly to kind of talk to other people about it, because actually they value and learn from that process as well. So yeah, absolutely. And it's about kind of targeting. It's obviously about targeting who you're talking to and targeting what the conversations are about and stuff, but actually there's fewer kind of adaptations that need to be made to the process than you think.
Fantastic. Okay, that's great. That needs to be the last question. We're running out of time as ever. I have no idea where the time has gone this morning. Huge amount of content. Big thank you to the speakers. Paul, Richard, thank you very much for that final presentation, but also thank you to the other speakers of this morning. Great presentation. So the 3 constructs there. And there's a lesson for each of us, I think, which is to say that it is a test and learn process. There are techniques, there are constructs in place, but there has to be a learning element to tackling these challenges, to identify the right hypothesis and the right route to the end solution. So, okay, the poll is now up on screen. I've mentioned it a couple of times, so please do take the time to fill that in. It's enormously useful to us, because we use these responses to identify what we should be doing for upcoming events, and it helps us make sure that we are absolutely meeting your needs and the needs of the membership overall. I'll give you a minute to fill that. There are only 4 questions up here, one for each of the presentations and then one for the overall morning. So please do fill those in. Whilst you're doing that, I'll again say thank you to all of today's presenters. I think it's been a really, really fascinating session this morning. Innovation, such a hot topic. Chief finance officers of the country are all saying that they want to cut budgets, and at the same time they want more innovation. So do more for less, faster seems to be the mantra. And you're in trouble when the chief finance officers are coming into the frame. So adopting and utilizing new innovation techniques is really very much to the fore for all of us. So thank you to everybody for tuning in. It's been great to have you with us this morning. I hope these presentations have ignited new ideas and thoughts that you can apply to your business thinking when you get back to the office or back to your kitchen or back to your workbench, wherever you happen to be at this point in time. I should also let you know, just before we wrap up, there's still a minute to go, that today's presentations will be made available to members. It will be on the Aura website in the Knowledge tab, and the presentations will be added before the end of the week, so look out for those there. I should also remind you to join us tomorrow, I guess, for the second part of this innovation program double bill. Today has been about process. Tomorrow is about techniques. So we have 4 presentations tomorrow on innovative techniques. So please do join us for that. If you haven't signed up for them already, you can do so. You can register on the Aura website, so pop over there now if you still haven't signed up, and look forward to you joining us tomorrow. I think I've run out of time. We're very close to the 10:30. We'll draw this meeting today to a close. So until tomorrow morning, when I hope you will be joining us, this is Tom Kerr saying be careful not to get your fingers burned in the kitchen. Until tomorrow, goodbye for now.